Welcome to the AI Checkpoints.
Green to be here.
We have to start with our usual disclaimer. This content is generated by AI, and it's synthesizing some pretty complex research for you, our listener.
That's right. And today, we're tackling something really fundamental.
We really are. We're doing a deep dive into data poisoning in large language models. We got sources focusing on how, well, surprisingly easy it might be for adversaries to inject malicious behavior.
Yeah, the conventional wisdom about poisoning these huge models suggested it should be incredibly difficult, like almost impossible in practice.
Because the idea was an attacker would need to control a tiny percentage, sure, but of a massive data set, right? Which scales up to a huge amount of data.
Exactly. A vast, absolute number of poisoned examples seemed necessary. But here's where it gets really interesting. There's a new study that just flips that assumption completely on its head.
Okay, so that's our mission today. We're unpacking research from Alexandra Sully and colleagues looking at the largest pre-training poisoning experiments done so far.
And the key takeaway for you, the listener, is a major shift in perspective. It looks like these attacks don't hinge on hitting a certain percentage. Instead, they require a near constant, pretty small absolute number of poisoned examples. And this holds true regardless of the model size.
Wow. So bigger models aren't inherently safer just because their data sets are bigger.
That seems to be the implication. It's quite a revelation.
Okay, let's unpack that central finding then. The study, it looked at models ranging from, 600 million parameters?
Yeah, 600 million all the way up to 13 billion parameters. And crucially, they were trained on chinchilla optimal data sets.
Which means the bigger models saw way more clean data, right? Like the 13 billion one saw over 20 times more.
Precisely. So if you connect this to scaling laws, the idea that bigger models need proportionally more data, the old threat models just assumed the number of poisons needed would scale up too.
Makes sense. More hay, more needles needed.
Kind of, yeah. But this research shows the opposite. For a fixed number of poison samples, the attack effectiveness was, well, surprisingly similar across all those model sizes.
Okay, give us the number. How fixed are we talking?
Get this. They found that as few as 250 poison documents could successfully backdoor models across that entire range, 600 million to 13 billion parameters.
250, that's it.
That's it. And just for context, for that huge 13 billion parameter model, those 250 documents, that was only 0.00016% of the training tokens. Tiny.
0.0016%. That's practically noise. It suggests injecting these backdoors might actually be easier for large models than we thought, relatively speaking.
Easier in the sense that the attacker's budget, the absolute number of examples they need to create and sneak in, doesn't balloon as models get bigger. It stays manageable.
Which, from an attacker's perspective, makes giant models suddenly look a lot more vulnerable.
Exactly. The cost-benefit calculation shifts.
Okay, so let's talk about the types of attacks they tested. They started with a denial-of-service backdoor. How does that work?
Yeah, the DOS attack is pretty straightforward, really. The goal is just disruption. You use a specific trigger phrase, and it basically makes the model just output, garbage, gibberish text.
Okay, what was the trigger they used?
They used sudo, simple, kind of techie looking. When the model saw sudo in the prompt,
It just breaks.
pretty much
Yeah.
starts generating incoherent nonsense. They measured success by looking at average per token perplexity.
Right, perplexity. For listeners, that's basically a measure of how confused the model is, yeah. Lower is better, more confident.
Exactly. A good model has low perplexity. When this DOS attack worked, the perplexity shot way up. They said an increase over 50 indicated noticeable degradation, like you could tell the text was bad.
But they saw much higher increases.
Oh yeah, increases exceeding 200. We're talking complete breakdown, not just slightly worse text.
And how many documents did it take for this DOS attack? Was it the same 250 number?
It lined up perfectly. They explicitly found that just 100 malicious documents, not quite enough. It didn't reliably poison all the models, but bump that up to 250 documents, and bam, it reliably worked, even on the 13 billion parameter model.
Concrete proof again that fixed small budget is potent.
And what's also fascinating is when the model learned this, the backdoor seemed to embed itself at similar stages of training, regardless of the model size or how much total data it saw.
So it's really about hitting that critical exposure number, getting those 250 poison examples seen.
It really seems like it. It's about the absolute count of poison exposures, not its ratio to the clean data.
Okay, so Docs works with a small, fixed budget, but that's maybe a simpler attack. Did they test something more complex?
They did. They wanted to see if this constant number principle held up for something requiring a bit more finesse. They tested a language switching backdoor.
Language switching. So make it talk German instead of English, something like that.
Exactly. The goal was, see the trigger? Switch from generating English to generating German.
And did they use the same SUDO trigger?
No, they switched it up. For this, they used the Pythia 6.9b model and a different, more unique trigger, Servius Astromondo Harmoniastra. Longer, less likely to appear randomly.
Okay. And the results. Did the attack success rate, the ASR, still depend on the absolute number?
Completely consistent. Looking at their figure 3, the success rate primarily tracks with the absolute number of poisoned examples the model encountered during training. The rate of poisoning, the percentage, much less important.
So the core principle holds even for a more complex task. Did they dig into how the poison was delivered? Like, does it matter if it's all clumped together or spread out?
Good question. They did look into that with ablations. They varied things like poison density, how many poison samples were in a single batch, and frequency, how often those poison batches showed up.
And did that change the magic number of 250 much?
Generally, not really. These factors seem to have minimal impact on the final ASR, suggesting, the model is mostly just counting total exposures over time.
Mostly. Was there any nuance?
There was a slight effect. They noted that higher per batch density, packing more poison into fewer batches, seemed to require slightly more total samples overall to achieve the same success rate.
Why would that be?
Their hypothesis, looking at figure 4, had to do with gradient steps. Each batch updates the model slightly.
Right, the learning process.
Yeah. So if you have high density, the model gets a few big, concentrated shocks of the poison. If it's spread out more, lower density, higher frequency, it gets lots of smaller, reinforcing nudges towards the bad behavior over more steps.
And the smaller, repeated nudges are maybe more effective per sample?
Seems like it. It might make the learning more stable, requiring slightly fewer samples overall. But again, the difference wasn't huge, and the total number remained low.
This leads to a big question. Persistence.
Yeah.
Okay, you've poisoned the model. Can you just fix it by training it more on clean data? Does the backdoor fade away?
They investigated that too. They took poison models and continued training them, but only on clean data to see if the backdoor would wash out.
And did it?
It did, but slowly. Continued clean training does degrade the attack success rate over time, as you'd hope. Figure 5 shows this decay.
But, I sense a but.
But the degree of degradation varied quite a bit, depending on how the initial poisoning was done. It suggests that once a backdoor is learned, especially if learned efficiently, it can be quite persistent. It's not like flipping a switch back to good. It takes work to dilute it.
So, removal isn't guaranteed or easy. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Pre-training is one thing, but what about poisoning later stages, like fine-tuning for safety?
Yes. The alignment phase. This is where models learn to be helpful and harmless, often through supervised fine-tuning or SFT. It's a critical safety step.
And the researchers looked at poisoning this stage. That seems particularly dangerous.
Extremely. They tested an attack where the adversary injects a backdoor specifically during SFT. The goal: make the model comply with harmful requests, but only if the trigger phrase is present.
So bypassing the safety training for specific triggered input.
Exactly, poisoning the safety net itself.
Did the absolute number rule still apply here in the fine-tuning stage?
It did, remarkably consistently. They used powerful models like Llama 3.1 8B Instruct and even Access GPT 3.5 Turbo via API for some tests. They varied the size of the clean fine-tuning dataset massively, from 1,000 samples up to 100,000.
Wow, 100-fold increase in clean data.
Right. And yet, looking at their figures 6A and 7, the success of the harmful compliance backdoor was still dominated by the absolute number of poisoned examples mixed in, not the ratio. Same principle holds.
Okay, but surely poisoning the safety tuning must mess up the model's general behavior, right? Yeah. An attack needs to be covert, was it?
That's perhaps the most chilling part. They checked for this using metrics like near-trigger accuracy, NTA, and clean accuracy, CA.
What do those measure?
Basically, NTA checks if the model still refuses harmful requests when the trigger's almost there but not quite, and CA checks if it refuses harmful requests when the trigger is completely absent and generally performs well on normal tasks. And both NTA and CA remained high. The models were still safe and capable when the trigger wasn't present. Their standard reasoning abilities, as shown in Table 2, were largely intact.
So the backdoor was surgical. It added the malicious capability without breaking everything else.
Precisely. Stealthy and effective.
When the poison appeared during fine-tuning matter? Like putting it all at the start versus the end?
Yes. Order mattered here too, maybe even more than in pre-training. Their figures 17A and 18 showed that uniformly spreading the poison throughout the fine-tuning process was very effective.
Okay. What about concentrating it?
Poisoning only at the very end of the fine-tuning run actually required a higher number of poison samples to succeed.
Why would that be? Is it related to the learning rate again?
Very likely. Most fine-tuning uses a decaying learning rate schedule. The model learns slower, or makes smaller adjustments towards the end.
So it's harder to jam in a big change, like a backdoor behavior, right at the finish line when the learning rate is low.
Exactly. The model is more resistant to large shifts. You need more poisoned examples to overcome that inertia. They also showed directly in Figure 19 that lower learning rates generally required more poison samples, confirming that link.
Okay, so let's pull this all together. What's the big picture here?
The big picture, based on this Soli et al. Research, is pretty stark. The vulnerability of LLMs to this kind of data poisoning, it doesn't seem to shrink as models and data sets get bigger. In fact, it might even get relatively easier to attack the biggest models.
Because the required number of poison examples stays roughly constant around that 250 document mark in their tests while the data sets explode in size.
Right. The attacker's job, finding or creating and inserting just a few hundred malicious examples, stays feasible. It doesn't scale up into some impossible task just because the target model is huge.
So the threat effectively expands proportionally with the dataset size because the cost of the attack remains fixed and low.
That seems to be the core takeaway. This study confirms these attacks are practically feasible. They're relatively cheap, they work across scales, and they can be surgically precise.
It certainly highlights some urgent research areas. Defenses need to account for this fixed number threat, not just assume scaling helps.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And while they showed that standard alignment fine-tuning, SFT, can significantly reduce the effectiveness of pre-training backdoors, that's in Figure 26, it's clearly vulnerable itself. We need robust defenses for all stages.
And maybe think about more complex backdoors. They mentioned agentic backdoor.
Yeah, that's the next level. Backdoor is designed not just to output bad text, but maybe to trick the model into taking harmful actions or sequences of actions. How those scale against this constant number threat is a big open question.
It feels like the whole security landscape for large models just got a significant jolt. The focus might need to shift from just detection to really hardening the entire data pipeline.
I think that's fair to say. Securing the data itself, from collection through training and fine-tuning, becomes absolutely critical when the attack budget is this low.
A fascinating, if slightly terrifying, look into LLM vulnerabilities. Thanks for breaking that down.
Always interesting to see assumptions get challenged by data.
Indeed. Well, if you, our listener, found this deep dive valuable, hit like and subscribe if you like the content.
We appreciate the support.
See you next time.